September 3rd, 1943, 2:47 a.m. Gestapo headquarters, Berlin. Claire Bouchard's hands didn't shake as she forged the travel papers. They couldn't. Not when Heinrich Müller lay unconscious in the basement cell below, bleeding from interrogation wounds she'd spent 6 months ensuring he'd never receive. The fountain pen scratched against the Reich security letterhead she'd stolen 3 weeks prior. Outside, Allied bombers droned toward their targets. Inside, she committed the one unforgivable sin in espionage, choosing the enemy over the mission. She was already dead. She just hadn't told London yet. The making of a ghost. Claire Bouchard didn't exist. The woman who carried that name, French national, Ministry of Food translator, mistress to a mid-level SS administrator, was a construction. Beneath the identity lay something else entirely. Margaret Thompson, born Cheltenham, 1918, recruited to the Special Operations Executive in 1941, trained in silent killing and radio encryption at Beaulieu Manor, inserted into occupied France 6 months before she'd ever heard the name Heinrich Müller. The SOE didn't create spies for battlefield intelligence. They created ghosts who walked through enemy territory, gathering fragments of conversations, photographing documents, turning German officers into unwitting sources. Margaret, now Claire, had done this for 18 months before Berlin. 42 successful intelligence reports, 3 sabotage operations, 0 compromise. Her handler's final instruction before the Berlin assignment had been crystalline in its simplicity. Hauptsturmführer Heinrich Müller, Wehrmacht Logistics, suspected Allied sympathizer, get close, confirm, recruit, or eliminate. No one mentioned what happened if neither option proved viable. The target, Heinrich Müller, was not what London expected. The dossier suggested a Wehrmacht bureaucrat drowning in Reich paperwork, potentially disillusioned, possibly approachable. What Claire found instead was something far more dangerous to her mission, a man carrying visible weight. She first saw him at a state dinner in January 1943, standing apart from the other officers. Not in physical distance, he occupied his required position in the reception line, but in the way he held himself. Other men wore their uniforms like declarations. Müller wore his like an obligation he couldn't shed. Their introduction was manufactured. SOE had arranged her placement in the Ministry of Food specifically to create intersection points with Wehrmacht logistics officers. The conversation was brief, professional. He inquired about French grain shipments. She provided carefully researched answers that were accurate enough to seem valuable, incomplete enough to require follow-up. He called on her office 3 days later. The gradual entanglement. Intelligence work isn't the dramatic cinema of immediate seduction and rapid extraction. It's the slow accumulation of trust, the careful construction of necessity, the patient building of a relationship that can withstand scrutiny while serving a hidden purpose. Claire became useful to Müller. Her knowledge of French agricultural systems helped him navigate the impossible logistics of feeding a fragmenting empire. His requests for information grew more frequent. She provided answers, always accurate, always helpful, always calibrated to make him slightly dependent on her expertise while revealing nothing operational. By March, they were meeting weekly. By April, the meetings had shifted from his office to quieter venues, cafes, parks in the Tiergarten when weather allowed. The transition seemed natural. He never made it obvious, but Claire recognized the pattern. He was isolating himself from observation when speaking with her. This should have triggered immediate suspicion. A German officer seeking privacy with a foreign national was either running his own operation or profoundly compromised. London would want to know which. She began submitting detailed reports. His questions about French infrastructure, his visible frustration with SS requisition policies, his careful avoidance of party rhetoric in private conversation. Everything suggested the dossier was accurate. Potential recruitment target, possible ideological disillusionment, worth developing. But the reports she sent to London were incomplete. She didn't mention the way he'd paused mid-sentence when describing civilian casualties in Stalingrad, or the book of Rilke poetry she'd noticed in his apartment during one carefully arranged visit, or the fact that he'd arranged for extra rations to reach the French labourers in his supply chain. Small omissions. Unprofessional. Dangerous. The recognition, the moment Claire realised the mission was compromised, came in early June, not through any dramatic revelation, but through arithmetic. She was preparing her weekly transmission to London when she counted the intelligence actually gathered, logistics data that could be obtained from other sources, personality assessments that confirmed existing suspicions, nothing actionable for recruitment or elimination. 6 months of contact, 0 operational progress. The trained response would be escalation, increase pressure, force the recruitment decision, or confirm he was unsuitable and eliminate the security risk. Standard procedure, clean execution. She didn't send that recommendation. Instead, she found herself analysing his behavioural patterns not for exploitation opportunities, but for what they revealed about the man himself. He'd been drafted in 1939. Logistics background, kept deliberately away from frontline service. He fulfilled his duties with mechanical precision while maintaining careful emotional distance from Reich ideology. Not resistance, that would be too dangerous, but something quieter. Survival through minimal compliance. He was, she realized with uncomfortable clarity, trying to move through the war without becoming it. And she was lying to London about her inability to convert him, because converting him would require destroying what little moral ground he'd managed to preserve. The complication. Heinrich asked her to dinner on June 18th. Not a working meeting. Dinner. His apartment. The invitation was carefully phrased. No pressure, professional courtesy, gratitude for her assistance with French logistics. She should have declined. SOE training was explicit about maintaining operational distance. Personal involvement created vulnerabilities. Emotions compromised judgment. The moment an agent started justifying exceptions to protocol, the mission was already failing. She accepted. The evening was quiet. He'd obtained actual French wine, a small miracle in wartime Berlin. They discussed literature instead of logistics. He mentioned growing up in Munich, studying philosophy before the war made such pursuits impractical. She carefully maintained her cover story, but found herself sharing details she'd invented for Claire Bouchard as if they were genuinely hers. When he walked her to the door, he hesitated. Then, carefully, "I appreciate that you see me as separate from this," a gesture taking in the city beyond. Many don't anymore. She should have used that moment. Vulnerability was leverage. A skilled operative would have deepened the emotional connection, made him dependent, created the foundation for recruitment. Instead, she'd simply told him good night and left. The unraveling. The Gestapo began investigating Claire Bouchard in late August. Not through any compromise she'd created, through pure bureaucratic coincidence. A review of Ministry of Food personnel files revealed minor inconsistencies in her background documentation. Small things. The kind of flaws that normally vanished into Reich administrative chaos. Except Heinrich's name was in her file. Recorded meetings. Documented consultations. The Gestapo didn't suspect her yet, but they were thorough. They would examine everyone connected to the investigation, including him. She learned about the investigation through her network of sources, German civil servants who fed information to Allied intelligence for reasons ranging from ideological conviction to personal survival. The source who brought her the news was terrified. They're scheduling him for questioning, standard protocol for anyone connected to a person under review. If there's anything irregular in his association with you, they'll find it. There was nothing irregular. He'd done nothing wrong. But she knew how Gestapo questioning worked. They would probe. They would search his apartment. They would find the Rilke poetry, the diverted rations, the careful non-compliance. not treason, not collaboration, just insufficient enthusiasm, just the smallest acts of maintaining humanity in an inhumane system. Insufficient enthusiasm was enough. The calculation. September 2nd, 24 hours before Heinrich's scheduled questioning. Claire sat in her apartment running the mathematics of survival. Option 1. Disappear. Activate emergency exfiltration. Return to London. File report on compromised cover. Standard procedure. Clean extraction. Mission loss acceptable given changed circumstances. Option 2. Warn him. Give Heinrich enough information to protect himself during questioning without revealing her true identity. Risky. Required careful calibration. Possible, but dangerous. Option 3. Extract him. Use forged documents to remove him from Berlin before questioning. Blow her cover completely. End her usefulness to SOE. Destroy 18 months of operational positioning. Save one German officer who had never explicitly committed to Allied support. Professionally, the choice was obvious. Option 1. Immediate extraction. The mission to recruit or eliminate Heinrich Müller had failed. Attempting rescue would compromise broader Allied operations for one individual of uncertain strategic value. But the mathematics didn't account for the variable that made the calculation impossible. She'd stopped seeing him as a target 4 months ago. The decision. September 3rd, 2:47 a.m. The travel papers were ready. Gestapo letterhead, Heinrich's name, emergency reassignment to Munich, away from Berlin, away from the investigation, carrying enough administrative weight to survive brief scrutiny. She'd stolen the letterhead weeks earlier, insurance against some vague future contingency. The Reich security stamp was genuine, lifted from an actual document during a carefully arranged office visit. The signature was forged, but accurate. She'd practiced it 40 times. It would work for perhaps 36 hours, long enough for him to reach Munich. After that, the discrepancies would surface. The investigation would expand. They would realize Claire Bouchard had access to materials and information far beyond a ministry translator's clearance, and they would know exactly what she was. Claire sealed the forged orders into an envelope, addressed it to Heinrich's office, and left it with the night courier service that delivered Reich administrative mail. By morning, he would find it. By afternoon, he would be on a train to Munich. By evening, the Gestapo would discover the forgery. She had perhaps 24 hours before they came for her. The aftermath. Heinrich Müller survived the war. Claire Bouchard, Margaret Thompson, did not. She was arrested September 4th, 1943, 18 hours after the forged travel orders were discovered. The Gestapo investigation was brief and efficient. Her apartment yielded her radio, her cipher materials, her false documentation. No denials were possible. No cover story would hold. Standard protocol would have been immediate execution. But she possessed operational intelligence the Gestapo wanted: SOE networks, contact procedures, other agents in Berlin. They kept her alive for interrogation. She told them nothing useful. The network she described had been shut down months earlier. The procedures she revealed were already compromised. The agents she named were fabrications. She'd been trained for this. How to appear to cooperate while protecting actual assets. She died in Ravensbrück concentration camp, February 1945. Killed not through any dramatic final confrontation, but through the slow, administrative brutality of the Reich's prison system. Dysentery, complicated by malnutrition, a body simply giving out after 18 months of captivity. Heinrich learned her real identity after the war. From British intelligence, not from her. He'd spent the remainder of the conflict in Munich, quietly managing Wehrmacht logistics, surviving through the same minimal compliance that had defined his wartime existence. When British investigators contacted him in 1946, compiling records of SOE operations, they told him about Margaret Thompson, about her mission, about what she'd sacrificed. He never married, returned to philosophy, teaching at Ludwig Maximilian University until his death in 1983. Colleagues remembered him as perpetually distant, professional competent, emotionally unreachable. One student recalled asking him about the war. His response, "I survived it. Someone else didn't. That's the only thing I know for certain." The choice between ghosts. Espionage operates on the assumption that individual lives
can be calculated as strategic resources.
Agents are valuable not for their humanity, but for their operational utility. Missions succeed when this calculation remains purely mathematical, when the ghost created by intelligence services never remembers it was once a person. Margaret Thompson chose to remember. She saw Heinrich Müller not as a recruitment target or elimination objective, but as another human trying to preserve something decent in indecent circumstances. That recognition made her vulnerable. It compromised her judgment. It destroyed her operational effectiveness. It also made her choose to save him at the cost of everything she'd built. There's no satisfying moral to that choice. No clean lesson about duty versus conscience, mission versus humanity. Claire Bouchard, Margaret Thompson, died in a concentration camp. Heinrich Müller lived 40 more years, carrying the weight of her sacrifice. The war continued regardless. The intelligence she might have gathered went uncollected. The networks she might have protected remained vulnerable. And one German logistics officer who tried to move through the war without becoming it survived because a British spy decided that his survival mattered more than her mission. The mathematics of espionage don't account for that variable, but the mathematics of being human sometimes do.